China and the U.S. has actually made a joint statement that COP26 on climate change. So that is another big area. We can collaborate. Pandemic could come again, or even we are. So what do you think about the climate change and the things that we can also work together in terms of the common background?
Well, I do think it is an area that we can work together. I'm impressed by a lot of the forward-looking policies that China has. For example, on electric vehicles. I mean, it's impressive what China is proposing to do for itself. Obviously, you are a country in transition, energy transition. We are too. But you're in a country with energy transition. And so I think there are opportunities that we could explore. Where can we collaborate on climate change? We do have to find a number of things where we can at least have conversations with each other, look at potentially joint projects, just like in the healthcare area. I mean, there was actually a fairly robust collaboration between our medical scientists, for many years, which was a good thing because it became the foundation point for the cooperation that did exist for the pandemic. So we should look for these opportunities, Dr. Wang.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. John Hamre. So what I think that really make the two countries interesting now is that the world has a lot of common demand, actually. For example, the infrastructure. We see that worldwide there is a huge demand for infrastructure, developing countries, but also developed countries. I noticed that European leader just announced last week they're going to come up with 350 billion euro on putting the Euro Gateway, EU Gateway project for infrastructure. President Biden mentioned about past his 1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, and on the same day he talked to President Xi after he signed that bill. And of course, China has this Belt and Road Initiative, which has been carrying on for the last 8 years. So infrastructure-wise, I mean, we had the World Bank, we had the BRICS New Development Bank, we had the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. On this, and also G7 proposed the Build Back Better, D3W by President Biden. So do you think that we can really, work together on those infrastructure where I think we have the biggest denominator, biggest draw of the future benefits for everyone? And then that's where probably can sustain us for the next half a century of prosperity and success and growth potential. So what do you think about that? All those areas that we could work on infrastructure.
Yeah, there's an astounding demand around the world for infrastructure building. In some places for brand new infrastructure, in some places like in the United States for modernizing our infrastructure. It's I'll be honest, it's rather embarrassing to look at the state of a lot of America's bridges and roads. Our airports are not, they're disappointing. So there's a lot that we should do, but globally infrastructure is a major issue. And I think what we should probably do is start by looking at what are the areas where we know that there is a trend we're all going to want to deal with, such as how do we build sustainable infrastructure that has a revenue base underneath it, so it doesn't become a white elephant. It doesn't become a very giant project that can't support itself financially. So I think there's some financial things. I think we need to find ways to help third world countries to do a better job of managing complex tender offerings. This is a complicated thing. Infrastructure projects are big and elaborate and complex. Helping other countries do a better job of deciding what's in their interest, what is sustainable. Those, I think, would be things we could work on together.
Yeah, that's great. And So, John, I mean, we're also the theme of our topic today is also American foreign policy, and we know that I know it's very significant that President Biden actually, when he said during the Afghanistan withdrawal, he said from now on the U.S. will no longer seek nation building, and which I think it's a very serious reflection of what has been happening in the last 2 decades in Afghanistan, and maybe to that matter to other countries. So, what do you think on that U.S. foreign policy front? There's some deep thinking and a reflection going on, and particularly President Biden saying that is there a paradigm shift or something like that?
Well, I think President Biden was reflecting what the American public feels, which is we were in Afghanistan, we didn't have a strategy, we were not successful, and we shouldn't get involved in things where we don't know what we're doing. I think that was basically the commentary that was behind that statement. Now, does it mean that America is going to pull back from working with other countries in the world towards, building stronger institutions, et cetera? No, I don't think it means that we'll abandon that. But I do think it means that Americans feel, certainly the Biden administration feels this, but I think most Americans do, that we used the military too excessively, and we didn't really have a plan, and that we were not successful. And so it's, I think, a foreign policy that is more focused on solid economics, on social development, and on traditional diplomacy is, I think, what he's talking about. The term nation building, it took on a quality of an American, we were going to shape the world so it looked like us. And I think that is over. I don't think we're doing that any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, John. And I also noticed, actually, President Biden said during the President Xi and the President Biden virtual summit just recently, President Biden said, U.S. does not seeking to change China and does not also wants to have alliance against China. So he also recognized one China policy. So he showed some, positive attitudes there. But we are actually seeing, probably U.S. is divided. You have a very hawkish Congress. You have other stakeholders. So what do you think about can we really, China-U.S. relation? If China, on its own, can become the second largest economy, there must be something done right. And so how can we really peacefully coexisting, as President Xi put it in the statement when he met virtually with President Biden? So what do you think about, in general assessment, that what we can do about China-U.S. relations?
Yeah, the sentiments in Washington are very negative right now about China, and I think that's very unfortunate, because it makes it hard for us to develop, real ideas, real policies in a constructive way. Look, we're two great countries. We have global interests. We're going to have areas where we're going to disagree with each other. We're going to rub up against each other, in ways. So we know, because we've got these complex, multidimensional interests, and they're not always aligned. Sometimes they're in tension. We have to find ways where we don't let the tension overwhelm us and prevent us from having the kind of constructive conversation to work through the problems. Now, in the U.S., I think in Washington, there are basically two camps. And one camp believes that China is racing ahead. It's going to be dangerous. We better stop them any way we can. That's one camp. The second camp, and I'm in the second camp is this is a huge, unprecedented competition. We're out of shape. It's like a runner that hasn't been exercising. Well, we're out of shape. We're going to have to get in shape if we're going to stay up in this competition. So instead of trying to trip China because it's running ahead of us, we need to work harder to run faster. So I think I'm in the second camp. I believe that America's focus ought to be on improving ourselves, fixing our own problems, overcoming the problems within our own society. This is where I think we should be focusing, rather than having the conversation with China being about opposition to everything you say or do. That's going to go nowhere, in my view. So I'm in the camp that says if America is going to compete effectively, we've got to get stronger internally.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I think that is really more realistic and a rational approach. So thank you for your comment. And we know that the U.S. is coming up with a midterm election next year, and so how do you assess the U.S. The political landscape? I mean, we have Democrats barely have a majority at the Senate House, and of course, we see the gap, the top elite and the massive population in the U.S. The gap is still widening. I mean, in terms of the middle class, haven't seen the real income gone up in the last 20, 30 years, and whereas China now, I mean, they preempting that, they have been starting to, common prosperity and lift 800 million people out of poverty, so prevent the populism, this kind of drive. So I think that, with Trump, even though he's not in office, but Trumpism is still very thriving. And so how do you assess the political, future of next 2 years, where it's very important if the U.S., direction the U.S. is taking, it's affecting the world, it's affecting U.S.-China relations, and you are the top expert on U.S. think tank, so probably this is your area. Yeah.
Well, I'm hardly an expert, but I think about this all the time. America has had two periods in its history where there were profound changes in our political system. One was about 1842, basically, to 1860. And of course, it ended in a civil war, which was a bad thing. The other big period of change, lots of tension, politics got turned upside down, was from about 1885 until 1915. In both cases, it lasted over 20 years, and I'm afraid we're in the front end of probably a 20-year period where our politics is going through profound restructuring. And I have my own personal views about it. I don't think either political party here is effectively focusing on the challenges we're going to face over the next 10 years or 15 years. I think both of the parties are battling over their policies of the past rather than looking forward to the future. So I think we're going to be internally divided. I think there's still going to be a lot of progressive work, but it's going to happen more at the state level. And I think the economic disparity that you mentioned is very real and is going to be the greatest thing we're going to have to work on. And I would say that's the big debate that we have right now between the Democrats and the Republicans. But I don't know that what's going to come out of it is going to be a breakthrough. I think we're going to have internal tension in the United States probably for the next 15 years.